My name is Marianne, 36 years old, and until recently I was the VP of Business Development. For a tech company, I helped grow from 5 million to 300 million in valuation. 8 years of my life, countless sacrifices, and one massive acquisition later, I was rewarded with a pink slip the day after closing our $277 million deal. What they never expected was how thoroughly I could dismantle everything I had built. Before I tell you how I took back control of my life after the worst betrayal of my career, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had a boss who tried to take credit for your work. I joined Innovate Tech as an account manager when they were just a promising startup with 20 employees and an innovative data analytics platform. The office was a converted warehouse with mismatched furniture and a ping-pong table that doubled as our conference space when investors visited. Thomas Wheeler, our CEO and founder, interviewed me personally. He was charismatic, brilliant, and seemed genuinely interested in my ideas for growing the client base. Marianne, most candidates talk about what the company can do for them, he said, leaning back in his chair. You are the first one who came with a concrete plan for what you could do for us. That is exactly the kind of initiative we need. I still remember the pride I felt walking into that scrappy office on my first day. Everyone wore multiple hats back then. I managed accounts, wrote marketing copy, and occasionally answered support calls when the team was overwhelmed. Thomas worked alongside us, often staying latest of all. We celebrated every new client with cheap champagne and pizza parties. My background in enterprise software sales proved valuable as I navigated our product into larger companies. Within 18 months, I had landed us 3 major clients, each worth over $1 million annually. Thomas promoted me to Director of Sales, giving me a small team to manage. You have a gift for understanding what clients need before they know it themselves, he told me during my performance review. That is invaluable. As the years passed, Innovate Tech grew rapidly. We moved to sleek downtown offices with glass walls and ergonomic furniture. The team expanded to over 200 people across 3 offices. Thomas stopped joining the sales calls and client meetings, focusing instead on investor relations and strategic partnerships. By my 5th year, I had been promoted to VP of Business Development, managing a team of 30 sales and account management professionals. The company culture shifted as we grew. The spontaneous celebrations became scheduled quarterly events. The open communication policy gave way to structured channels and hierarchies. It was natural evolution for a growing company, but something essential was changing too. My greatest achievement came when I secured GlobalX, a multinational corporation, as our client. This was our crown jewel account, eventually worth $120 million annually, representing nearly 40% of our total revenue. Landing them had required 6 months of presentations, proofs of concept, and relationship building. I flew to their headquarters 12 times, missing my cousin's wedding and my nephew's birth in the process. The personal sacrifices accumulated. My relationship with my boyfriend of 3 years ended when he got tired of competing with my work schedule. It is like you are married to that company, he said as he packed his things from our apartment. I could not argue with him. I was regularly working 70-hour weeks, my phone constantly buzzing with notifications, calls, and emails. But I believed in what we were building. I had assembled a stellar team who shared my dedication. Jessica, our marketing director, crafted perfect messaging for each target industry. Marcus, my top sales manager, had an uncanny ability to close even the most hesitant prospects. Rachel, our senior account executive, maintained relationships so strong that our client renewal rate hit 98% under her watch. We were a formidable unit, driving growth quarter after quarter. Thomas acknowledged our success publicly, but I noticed subtle changes in his behavior as we approached the $100 million revenue mark. He began inserting himself into meetings with our biggest clients, sometimes contradicting strategies we had carefully developed. He started referring to my sales team or my client relationships and investor calls the collective ownership of our success, shifting to singular possession. When acquisition rumors started circulating, Thomas called me into his office. The space had tripled in size since our early days, now featuring custom furniture and city views. Marianne, you have heard the rumors, he said, gesturing for me to sit across from his imposing desk. Several companies are interested in acquiring us. I need you to prepare the team. The next few months will be critical. What is the timeline? I asked already, mentally cataloging which client metrics would impress potential buyers. Fast. We have the first meeting with NextGen Corp next week. They are the frontrunner with the resources to take us global. His eyes gleamed with anticipation. This could be huge for all of us. Stock options. Remember. I nodded, feeling both excitement and apprehension. My equity stake was significant after 8 years, potentially life-changing if the acquisition went through at the right valuation. Do not worry about your position, Thomas added, as if reading my mind. Any acquiring company would be crazy to disrupt our revenue engine. You and your team are our greatest assets. I left that meeting with renewed purpose, believing we were on the cusp of something extraordinary. The acquisition would validate all our hard work, all the sacrifices. I called my team together that afternoon to prepare for the most important challenge of our careers, making Innovate Tech irresistible to buyers. None of us realized that in the boardroom where acquisition strategies were being planned, our futures were already being decided in ways none of us could have anticipated. The first meeting with potential buyers was scheduled for the following Monday, and it would set in motion events that would eventually lead to both my greatest professional humiliation and my most satisfying comeback. The next 3 months were the most intense of my professional life. NextGen Corp, a publicly traded technology conglomerate with global reach, sent a team of analysts to evaluate every aspect of our business. Their due diligence process was exhaustive, requiring documentation of every client relationship, contract, and revenue projection. My days started at 5 in the morning and often ended after midnight. I created detailed presentations showing client retention rates, average deal sizes, and growth trajectories. My team and I prepared spreadsheets demonstrating the stability and predictability of our revenue streams. We compiled case studies highlighting how our largest clients had expanded their contracts over time. They are particularly interested in client stability, Thomas told me after one of the early meetings with NextGen executives. They want to be sure they are not buying relationships that will disappear post-acquisition. I understood the concern. In our industry, client relationships often depended on individual connections rather than institutional loyalty. This was especially true for our crown jewel client GlobalX, where I had personally cultivated relationships with their Chief Information Officer and Chief Technology Officer over years of lunches, golf outings, and technology conferences. I will prepare detailed transition plans, I assured Thomas. We will demonstrate that our client relationships are systematic and sustainable. The NextGen team was led by Richard Harrington, their Chief Strategy Officer, a former management consultant with a reputation for aggressive cost-cutting after acquisitions. During our first meeting, his questions focused less on innovation and client relationships and more on operational redundancies and efficiency metrics. Miss Andrews, he addressed me with a calculating smile. Your client acquisition costs are 20% higher than industry standard. How do you justify the premium? I was prepared for this. Our clients stay with us 3 years longer than industry average, with annual contract expansions averaging 22%. The lifetime value justifies the upfront investment many times over. Richard nodded, making notes. And these relationships, they are institutionalized, not dependent on specific individuals. Thomas jumped in before I could answer. Absolutely. Marianne has built systems that ensure seamless client experiences regardless of personnel changes. I noticed he did not mention that I personally managed our largest accounts, including quarterly business reviews with GlobalX, that their executives insisted I attend personally. As the acquisition process progressed, my interactions with Thomas became increasingly strained. He scheduled private meetings with the NextGen team without my knowledge, though I was supposedly leading the business presentation aspects. Twice I walked into the conference room to find hushed conversations that abruptly changed topic when I appeared. 6 weeks into the process, I made an accidental discovery that sent a chill down my spine. Working late, I entered the executive conference room, looking for my forgotten laptop charger. On the whiteboard, partially erased but still visible, was an organizational chart for the post-acquisition structure. My position was conspicuously absent, with my direct reports reassigned under a new box labeled Next Gen BD Integration Lead. The next morning, I requested a private meeting with Thomas. I saw the org chart in the conference room, I said directly, watching his reaction. His expression flickered momentarily before settling into practiced concern. That was just one of many scenarios the integration team was exploring. Nothing is finalized. My name was not on it. Thomas leaned forward, his tone reassuring. Marianne, you are invaluable to this company. There are multiple conversations happening about the best structure going forward, but I would never let your contributions go unrecognized. He looked me straight in the eyes. I promise you will have a significant role post-acquisition. In fact, NextGen has specifically mentioned the importance of your client relationships. I wanted to believe him. 8 years of building something together created a bond that I thought transcended typical business relationships. I nodded, choosing trust over suspicion. Just keep doing what you are doing, he added. These deals are complicated with lots of moving parts. Focus on making our numbers look irresistible. And I did. The next month was a blur of financial projections, client testimonials, and capability demonstrations. NextGen brought in additional team members, including their chief financial officer and president of North American operations. Each meeting required fresh preparation, new angles, and compelling narratives about our market position. My team felt the pressure but performed admirably. Jessica created stunning presentation materials that made our growth story visually irresistible. Marcus compiled client success metrics that demonstrated our market dominance. Rachel ensured every client reference call went perfectly, coaching our customers on the key points to emphasize. 2 months into the process, NextGen made their initial offer $230 million. Thomas rejected it immediately, insisting our valuation was closer to $300 million. Another round of negotiations began, with my team scrambling to provide additional evidence of our value. The pivotal moment came during a presentation I gave to the combined executive teams about our client expansion strategy. I highlighted how we had grown the GlobalX account from an initial $2 million contract to $120 million over 4 years. Richard Harrington interrupted my presentation, and if you left the company tomorrow, what would happen to that account? The room fell silent. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I answered honestly. We have multiple touch points with GlobalX across all levels of both organizations. While I maintain the executive relationships, our integration with their systems and our proven ROI are the real retention factors. Richard nodded, seemingly satisfied. What I did not say was that GlobalX's CIO had personally told me at our last quarterly review, Marianne, you are the reason we keep expanding our contract. Your understanding of our business challenges sets you apart from every other vendor. The final week of negotiations was intense. The closing figure settled at $277 million, a significant premium over our projected earnings. The contracts were complex, with earn-out provisions, retention bonuses, and integration milestones. Throughout the process, Thomas repeatedly assured me and my team that our positions were secure. This deal would not be happening without your contributions, he told us during a team celebration the night before the closing. He raised a toast to me, specifically to Marianne, whose client relationships and revenue growth made this deal irresistible. I felt vindicated and secure. The acquisition would be life-changing for all of us. With our stock options, my 8 years of equity was worth over $2 million at the acquisition price. My sacrifices had paid off. The acquisition closed on a Thursday afternoon. The combined executive teams gathered in our boardroom for handshakes and photographs. Thomas and Richard signed the final documents while the rest of us applauded. Champagne flowed freely at the company-wide celebration afterward. To the future, Thomas announced to the assembled employees, This marks the beginning of an exciting new chapter for all of us. I went home that night exhausted but satisfied, believing I had secured not just a financial windfall, but an exciting new career opportunity with a global corporation. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from friends and family who had seen the press release announcing the acquisition. Before falling asleep, I noticed an email from HR scheduling a 9 a.m. meeting the following day to discuss transition details. I thought nothing of it, assuming it was about paperwork for stock option conversions or benefits enrollment with our new parent company. I had no idea that in less than 12 hours, everything I had built would be taken away from me in the most humiliating way possible. My alarm went off at 6:30 the next morning, same as every workday. I followed my usual routine: coffee, quick breakfast, news headlines, then dressed in one of my power suits, a navy blue tailored ensemble I had worn for numerous important client meetings. I felt optimistic driving to the office, mentally planning the integration activities for my team over the coming weeks. When I arrived, the office had a strange energy. Groups of people were huddled in conversations that abruptly stopped when I walked by. A few colleagues avoided eye contact entirely. I attributed it to the natural anxiety that comes with any acquisition and proceeded to my 9 a.m. meeting with HR. Linda, our human resources director, was waiting in her office with a man I did not recognize, who she introduced as Gerald Norton from NextGen's HR department. "Please have a seat, Marianne," Linda said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Is everything okay?" I asked, noticing the folder and documents laid out neatly on her desk. Linda cleared her throat. "As you know, with any acquisition, there are organizational changes that need to be made to eliminate redundancies and optimize the combined entity." My stomach dropped. The corporate speak was a thin veneer for what was coming. Gerald took over. "After careful evaluation of the organizational structure, we have determined that your position overlaps significantly with existing leadership at NextGen. Consequently, your role is being eliminated effective immediately." The words hit me like physical blows. Eliminated, effective immediately. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "I do not understand," I managed to say. I was assured repeatedly that my position was secure. Linda slid a document across the desk. "This is your severance package. It includes 6 months of salary continuation, accelerated vesting of your stock options, and health benefits coverage through the end of the year. It is quite generous." I stared at the document, not fully comprehending what was happening. "Does Thomas know about this?" Linda and Gerald exchanged glances. "This decision has been approved at the highest levels," Gerald said carefully. "I need to speak with Thomas," I insisted, standing up. "That would not be appropriate at this stage," Gerald countered. "We have a standard process for executive transitions. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings, and then you will be expected to leave the premises." Security. Like I was a threat. Like I had not dedicated 8 years of my life to building this company. In a daze, I followed the security guard to my office. As we walked through the open floor plan, conversations stopped and heads turned. Everyone was watching. The humiliation burned through me as I collected photos, awards, and a few personal items into a cardboard box provided by the guard. Through the glass walls of the executive suite, I could see Thomas in his office. Our eyes met briefly before he deliberately turned away, becoming engrossed in something on his computer screen. No acknowledgement, no goodbye. 8 years of partnership erased in a moment of cowardice. The security guard walked me to my car, taking my badge before I drove away. I made it halfway home before pulling into a shopping center parking lot, unable to continue as tears blurred my vision. I sat there for nearly an hour trying to process what had happened. My phone buzzed continuously with messages from my team members. "Jessica, emergency department meeting at 11. What is going on, Marcus? Are the rumors true? Please call me. Rachel, leadership announcement scheduled for 2 p.m. Are you okay?" I could not bring myself to respond yet. I needed to understand what had happened first. When I finally arrived home, I collapsed on my sofa, still in my suit, staring at the ceiling. My phone continued to buzz until I finally checked it. A company-wide email had gone out announcing organizational changes to align with our new corporate structure. 3 people from my team had been terminated along with me, all long-term employees who had been part of building our client relationships. More disturbingly, the email announced promotions for 3 executives who had always been closest to Thomas despite their departments underperforming compared to mine. Robert Sullivan, who had joined just 18 months ago as Director of Strategic Partnerships with little to show for, it was named the new VP of Global Business Development, effectively my replacement. By late afternoon, my team members began reaching out with updates. The 2 p.m. meeting had been brief and clinical. Thomas had not attended. Richard Harrington had announced the unfortunate but necessary changes and introduced the new leadership team. When questions arose about the client relationships I had managed, particularly GlobalX, Robert Sullivan had confidently asserted that the relationships are with the company, not individuals. Then came the social media updates. The company posted photos of the new executive leadership team celebrating the acquisition. Thomas wrote a personal post thanking NextGen for recognizing the extraordinary talent we have developed, with specific mentions of Robert and the other promoted executives. Not a word about those of us who had been discarded. The final blow came from a text message from Kelly, my former executive assistant who had worked closely with Thomas's office. "You should know," she wrote, "Thomas has been planning this for months. I overheard him telling Robert that once the acquisition closed, they would streamline redundant positions and he would finally have his team in place. I am sorry, Marianne. It was wrong." The betrayal crashed over me in waves, not just the termination, but the calculated nature of it, the promises made and broken, the public celebration of others built on the foundation of my work. Thomas had looked me in the eyes, repeatedly assured me of my value, all while planning to discard me the moment my usefulness in securing the acquisition was complete. That night alone in my apartment, I cycled through emotions: shock, grief, humiliation, and finally a slow-burning anger. I had given this company everything, sacrificed relationships, family events, even my health, during particularly stressful quarters. And this was how it ended, with a security escort and a generous severance package. I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop, staring at the blank screen. Tomorrow would be about picking up the pieces and figuring out next steps. But tonight was for acknowledging the pain of having my professional identity shattered in the space of a single meeting. What I did not yet realize was that in their eagerness to eliminate me, they had made a critical oversight, one that would give me the leverage to orchestrate a reckoning none of them could have anticipated. I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and a pounding headache, reminders of the previous day's emotional devastation and the bottle of wine I had finished. For a blissful moment before full consciousness returned, everything was normal. Then reality crashed back. I had been fired, escorted out, replaced. After a shower and strong coffee, I decided to review my termination paperwork carefully. The severance agreement was indeed generous at 6 months of salary, plus accelerated vesting of stock options worth over $2 million. But there was a catch: a broad non-disparagement clause and a requirement to sign a general release of all claims against the company. I noticed something odd, though. There was no reference to my original employment agreement or its non-compete provisions. Curious, I dug through my home files until I found the contract I had signed years earlier and all subsequent amendments. The original agreement had a standard non-compete clause prohibiting me from working for competitors or soliciting clients for 12 months after leaving the company. However, the most recent amendment, signed when I was promoted to VP, contained a critical modification. Non-compete provisions shall apply only in cases of voluntary resignation or termination for cause. If employment is terminated by the company without cause, non-compete restrictions shall not apply. I read the paragraph 3 times to be sure. Then I pulled up the termination letter again. It explicitly stated I was being let go due to elimination of position, which was categorized as without cause. A surge of possibilities rushed through me. Legally, I was free to work for competitors, free to contact clients. My equity was secure with the accelerated vesting, and my knowledge of our business was extensive. I had options I had not realized the night before. My phone rang. It was Jessica, my former marketing director. "Marianne, I am so sorry. None of us had any idea this was coming." "How are things there today?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Chaos." Robert Sullivan called a meeting with the GlobalX account team and could not answer basic questions about their implementation. The quarterly business review is scheduled for next week, and he has never even met their CIO. I felt a twinge of satisfaction. "What about you and the others?" Jessica hesitated. "They are asking us to stay, but it feels wrong after what they did to you and the others. Plus, Robert has already suggested rebranding initiatives that would undo everything we have built." Similar calls came throughout the day from Marcus, Rachel, and other team members. The story was consistent: confusion, declining morale, and new leaders who did not understand the business trying to assert authority. Around noon, I received an unexpected call from Barbara Johnson, the Chief Information Officer at GlobalX. "Marianne, what the hell is going on over there? I just got a call from someone named Robert Sullivan introducing himself as my new contact. They eliminated my position after the acquisition closed," I said simply. "Without even a transition period. That is ridiculous. You have been our point person for 4 years. Her voice conveyed genuine concern. "Are you okay?" "Processing," I admitted. "It was unexpected." "Well, their loss. You know our contract is up for renewal in 60 days. I would love to get your advice on some options we are considering off the record, of course. Could we meet for lunch next week?" After we scheduled lunch, I sat back thinking. Barbara's call had clarified something important. The client relationships I had built were personal, not just institutional. The new leadership either did not understand this or had arrogantly assumed they could simply take over without consequences. That afternoon, I received another significant call, this one from David Chen, VP of Business Development at Apogee Systems, one of Innovate Tech's competitors. David and I had maintained a respectful professional relationship over the years, occasionally running into each other at industry conferences. "Marianne, I heard what happened. Incredibly short-sighted of them. I will cut to the chase. We would be very interested in talking with you about joining our team." "I appreciate that, David, but I just got fired yesterday. I need some time to think." "Of course. But when you are ready, the door is open. And not just for you. We would be interested in any of your former team members who might be looking for a change." That evening, I consulted with an attorney specializing in employment law, bringing copies of all my agreements. After reviewing the documents, she confirmed my understanding. "You are in an unusually strong position," she explained. "Without the non-compete restrictions, you are free to work wherever you choose, including with direct competitors. You can also contact former clients provided you do not use confidential information or trade secrets in doing so." "What about my team members who are still there? Can I talk to them about opportunities elsewhere?" "That is trickier," she cautioned. "You should not directly solicit them while they are still employed there. However, if they reach out to you, you can certainly discuss options. Just document that they initiated the contact." With legal clarity established, I began formulating a plan. I spent the weekend researching NextGen's business model, stock performance, and dependence on recurring revenue. Their acquisition of Innovate Tech represented about 15% of their market capitalization, a significant investment. The press releases emphasized the stable client relationships and predictable revenue streams as key acquisition drivers. What if those relationships and revenue streams were not as stable as they believed? By Sunday night, I had mapped out a strategy. It was not about revenge, I told myself, but about correcting a fundamental injustice and misrepresentation. If Thomas and NextGen had been honest about their plans for post-acquisition restructuring, I could have prepared my clients and team properly. Instead, they had deliberately misled everyone to smooth the process, creating the very instability they sought to avoid. Monday morning, I began implementing my plan. First, I called David at Apogee Systems to discuss specific opportunities, not just for me, but potentially for a team. Next, I reached out to my former team members who had contacted me scheduling coffee meetings to check on their well-being. Finally, and most importantly, I confirmed my lunch with Barbara Johnson from GlobalX. As I prepared for these meetings, a company-wide email from Thomas appeared in my personal inbox, which was still receiving internal communications. The subject line read, "Exciting New Chapter Leadership Announcement." The message praised the seamless transition and announced additional promotions and organizational changes. The final paragraph read, "I am particularly proud to have promoted my loyal team members who have demonstrated extraordinary commitment to our vision. Together with our new next-gen colleagues, we are positioned for unprecedented growth and success. My loyal team." As if the people he had discarded had not been loyal. As if I had not sacrificed everything for his company. The calculated revisionism was infuriating. Within minutes, my phone lit up with messages from former colleagues sharing their disgust at the email. The pieces of my plan were falling into place faster than I had anticipated. I was ready for the next phase, the first direct confrontation with those who had orchestrated my downfall. I selected a quiet, upscale restaurant for my lunch with Barbara Johnson, GlobalX's Chief Information Officer. The location was private enough for a candid conversation but public enough to avoid any appearance of impropriety. I arrived early, choosing a corner table away from other diners. Barbara arrived precisely on time, her commanding presence drawing attention as she crossed the restaurant. At 58, she was a respected technology leader who had broken numerous glass ceilings throughout her career. We had bonded over being women in male-dominated fields, often sharing war stories over dinner during her visits to our offices. After brief pleasantries and ordering, she got straight to the point. "So tell me what really happened, Marianne." I recounted the events honestly, from the acquisition process through to my abrupt termination and the security escort. Barbara's expression darkened as I spoke. "Unbelievable. After everything you did to build that client base?" She shook her head. "The new guy, Sullivan, called me twice already. Clearly has no idea how our systems are integrated or why we expanded the contract last year." "How are you feeling about the renewal?" I asked carefully. "Honestly concerned. We chose Innovate Tech largely because of your understanding of our business challenges and your team's responsiveness. This transition raises significant questions." She studied me. "I sense you did not invite me to lunch just to catch up." "You are right," I admitted. "I wanted to be transparent about my situation, but also to let you know about my next steps." I outlined my discussions with Apogee Systems, explaining their interest in building a team under my leadership focused on enterprise clients like GlobalX. "David Chen reached out the day after my termination," I explained. "They are prepared to create custom solutions, specifically addressing the integration challenges we discussed in our last quarterly review, the ones Innovate Tech kept postponing." Barbara nodded thoughtfully. "I know Apogee. Solid technical foundation, though they have lacked the customer service approach you built at Innovate Tech. That is exactly why they want to bring me and potentially some of my team on board. They have the technical capabilities, but need the client relationship expertise." I slid a folder across the table. "This is a preliminary proposal addressing your specific pain points with implementation timelines and cost structures. No obligation, of course, but I wanted you to have options given your upcoming renewal decision." Barbara reviewed the documents with practiced efficiency, asking pointed questions about technical specifications and support models. I had anticipated her concerns and provided detailed answers. "This is compelling," she finally said. "The pricing is actually better than our current contract with more custom development included." She closed the folder. "Our board would need to review any change, and there would be transition considerations." "Of course, I would not expect an immediate decision." Barbara smiled slightly. "You know, Robert Sullivan told me yesterday that all client relationships are being enhanced under the new structure. When I asked specifically about the API customization we had been promised, he said he would circle back with the technical team." We both recognized the corporate non-answer for what it was. As lunch concluded, Barbara said, "I will take this to my team. Expect some technical questions." And Marianne, she added, "It is good to see you landing on your feet. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. They usually learn the hard way." The next phase of my plan unfolded over the following 2 weeks. Marcus called to tell me he had resigned from Innovate Tech, unwilling to work under the new leadership structure. "Robert keeps promising clients features we cannot deliver on the timeline he is suggesting," he explained. "It is only a matter of time before it blows up." 2 days later, Jessica also resigned, followed by Rachel and 2 senior account executives. None of them had been directly recruited by me, but all reached out after leaving to discuss opportunities at Apogee, where I had accepted a position as Senior Vice President of Enterprise Solutions with authority to build my own team. Meanwhile, industry news outlets began reporting on unusual executive turnover at Innovate Tech following the acquisition. NextGen's stock price dipped slightly as analysts questioned whether the integration was proceeding as smoothly as announced. The situation escalated when I encountered Thomas at the annual Technology Leadership Summit. I had just finished a panel discussion on client relationship management when I saw him across the reception hall surrounded by potential clients. Our eyes met and I could see the moment of panic as he realized I was there. Professional courtesy required him to acknowledge me when we eventually crossed paths near the bar. "Marianne," he said stiffly, "I did not expect to see you here." "I was invited to speak on the client experience panel," I replied evenly. Apparently, my reputation in that area remains intact. His discomfort was palpable. The reorganization decisions were difficult but necessary for the combined entity's success. "I hope your severance package has provided a suitable transition period. How thoughtful of you to consider my welfare after 8 years of building the company you sold." Thomas lowered his voice. "Business is business, Marianne. The leadership team I have assembled is fully aligned with the go-forward strategy." "Yes, I saw your announcement about promoting your loyal team," I replied, emphasizing his choice of words. "Interesting definition of loyalty." His eyes narrowed. "We are already seeing positive results. The GlobalX renewal is proceeding on schedule, and we are projecting 20% growth this quarter." It was a deliberate provocation mentioning GlobalX. Little did he know that earlier that day I had received a call from Barbara Johnson informing me that their board had voted to explore alternative vendors with Apogee as the frontrunner. "Enjoy it," I said, simply offering a smile that did not reach my eyes. "What is that supposed to mean?" Thomas asked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Just that success should be savored while it lasts. Transitions can be unpredictable." I raised my glass slightly. "To your continued success." Before he could respond, I turned and walked away, leaving him visibly unsettled. It was a small victory, but satisfying nonetheless. The following Monday morning, I made the call that would trigger the cascade of consequences I had carefully set in motion. From my new office at Apogee Systems, I dialed Barbara Johnson's direct line. "Barbara, it is Marianne. I have the implementation team assembled and ready to discuss transition details whenever your team is available." "Perfect timing," she replied. "Our board signed off this morning on terminating our Innovate Tech contract. The formal notification goes out today. Is your team available Wednesday to begin technical discussions?" "Absolutely. I will send calendar invitations within the hour." After we hung up, I sat back in my chair, a complex mixture of emotions washing over me. This was not merely about revenge, but about correcting an injustice and proving my value in the most definitive way possible. The relationships I had built, the trust I had earned, these were not company assets that could simply be transferred in an acquisition. "It is time," I murmured to myself, echoing the words I had imagined speaking in this moment. Within hours, the formal notification from GlobalX regarding the termination of their $120 million annual contract would arrive at NextGen's offices. The domino effect was about to begin, and not even Thomas would be able to stop what was coming. The news of GlobalX's contract termination hit Innovate Tech and NextGen like a tsunami. I learned from former colleagues that the notification arrived during a leadership team meeting, causing immediate pandemonium. Thomas had reportedly gone pale, immediately calling Barbara Johnson, only to be informed that she was in transition meetings with their new vendor and unavailable. By mid-afternoon, rumors were circulating throughout the industry. I received a text from Marcus all-hands emergency meeting called for 4 p.m. Executives seen running between conference rooms all day. What did you do? I replied simply, nothing they did not bring on themselves. The next morning, the fallout expanded dramatically. Tradewinds Corporation, another major client I had personally managed, worth $32 million annually, announced they were reviewing their vendor relationships in light of recent developments. By noon, they had also formally notified Innovate Tech of their intent not to renew their contract. David Chen stopped by my office, barely containing his excitement. 2 more clients called this morning asking for meetings. Both mentioned they had heard about your move to Apogee. The word is spreading faster than we anticipated. Within 72 hours of GlobalX's announcement, 3 more significant clients had either terminated their contracts or indicated they would not renew, citing relationship continuity concerns and strategic realignment of technology partners. The combined value of these contracts exceeded $85 million in annual recurring revenue. The financial impact was immediate and severe. NextGen's stock dropped 12% in a single day as market analysts issued concerned reports about the acquisition that had been hailed as transformative just weeks earlier. NextGen's acquisition of Innovate Tech appears to have triggered unexpected client instability, wrote one prominent analyst. The loss of major accounts raises questions about due diligence processes and post-acquisition integration planning. By the end of the week, NextGen had called an emergency board meeting to address the crisis. I learned this from an unexpected source, Philip Warner, a NextGen board member who had reached out through a mutual connection requesting a confidential meeting. We met at his private club in the financial district, a wood-paneled sanctuary where discretion was paramount. Philip, in his early 60s, with silver hair and the measured speech of someone who chooses words carefully, got straight to the point. Miss Andrews, the board is extremely concerned about the client departures following your transition from the company. I imagine they would be, I replied evenly. Those relationships represented significant value in the acquisition price. Indeed, $277 million to be precise. He studied me carefully. May I speak frankly? Please. The board was not fully informed about the nature of your departure or its potential implications. We were told the leadership changes were mutually agreed upon and that client relationships had been properly transitioned. I could not help but laugh. I was escorted out by security with no transition whatsoever. After 8 years of building those relationships. Philip nodded grimly. That is becoming increasingly clear. The board has called an emergency meeting tomorrow. Thomas Wheeler and Richard Harrington have been asked to explain how an acquisition that was supposed to add stability to our enterprise client base has instead triggered what amounts to a client exodus. And you are meeting with me because we need to understand if there is a path to stabilization. The combined loss in market capitalization and forward revenue already exceeds $300 million. More than the entire acquisition price. That is a significant problem for NextGen, I acknowledged, but I am not sure how it involves me at this point. Philip leaned forward. Would you be willing to address the board tomorrow to give your perspective on what happened and perhaps suggestions for remediation? I considered the request carefully. This was an opportunity I had not anticipated, a chance to tell my story directly to those with the power to hold Thomas and Richard accountable. I would be willing with certain conditions, I finally said. I need to bring legal counsel, and I expect complete transparency about what the board was told regarding my termination. Agreed, Philip said without hesitation. One more thing you should know. The client departures have triggered a breach of the financial covenants in the acquisition agreement. There are potential clawback provisions that could be invoked. This was significant news. The clawback he referenced meant that if certain financial targets were not met, portions of the acquisition payment could be reclaimed. potentially including the stock options that had been accelerated in my severance package. The next day, I arrived at NextGen's headquarters accompanied by my attorney. The contrast with my last exit from the building escorted by security was not lost on me. This time, I was shown to the executive boardroom where the NextGen board of directors sat around a massive table along with Thomas Richard and Robert Sullivan. Thomas's face registered shock when I entered. He had clearly not been informed of my invitation. "What is she doing here?" he demanded of Philip. "The board requested Miss Andrews's perspective on the client situation," Philip replied coolly. Given that the clients in question were all managed by her prior to the acquisition, Richard Harrington attempted to regain control of the narrative. "Before we proceed, I want to emphasize that all termination decisions were made collaboratively as part of standard post-acquisition integration planning." My attorney spoke up. "That assertion directly contradicts the documented timeline and communications we have compiled." The board chair, Eleanor Blackwell, a formidable executive with a reputation for no-nonsense leadership, intervened. "Let us hear from Miss Andrews directly. That is why she has been invited." I presented a factual timeline of events from the acquisition discussions through my termination and the subsequent client departures. I highlighted the repeated assurances I had received about my role's security and the absence of any transition planning for key client relationships. "The clients who have terminated their contracts did so because their trust was violated," I explained. "They had built relationships with me and my team based on understanding their specific business challenges and delivering customized solutions. When those relationships were severed without transition, they lost confidence in the company's commitment to their success." Thomas attempted to interject. "The client relationships belong to the company, not to individual employees. This is clearly a coordinated effort to damage the business." Eleanor Blackwell fixed him with a stern gaze. "Mr. Wheeler, the facts suggest otherwise. These clients have explicitly cited the leadership changes and relationship discontinuity in their termination notices." Robert Sullivan, looking increasingly uncomfortable, added, "We have been attempting to schedule meetings with GlobalX for 2 weeks, but they refuse to engage beyond their legal notification of contract termination." "Because they are already in implementation meetings with their new vendor," I stated simply. The board members exchanged alarmed glances. "You are saying they have already selected a new vendor who Richard demanded?" "That would be confidential client information," my attorney interjected. The discussion continued for nearly 3 hours, becoming increasingly tense as the full financial impact became clear. The combined effect of lost contracts and stock devaluation had indeed surpassed $300 million, effectively erasing the entire value of the acquisition. Eleanor finally called for a break, asking Thomas Richard and Robert to step out while the board conferred privately. During their absence, she addressed me directly. "Miss Andrews, putting aside the past decisions which clearly cannot be undone, what would you recommend as the path forward to stabilize the situation?" "Honesty and accountability," I replied without hesitation. "The clients who have left are unlikely to return in the near term. Their trust has been broken. But transparent communication about what went wrong and concrete steps to rebuild client confidence might prevent further departures." When Thomas, Richard, and Robert were invited back into the room, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Eleanor's expression was grave as she delivered the board's decision. "In light of the significant client instability and resulting financial impact, the board has determined that immediate leadership changes are necessary. Thomas and Richard will be placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation of the acquisition process and subsequent integration decisions." Thomas's face contorted with rage. "This is ridiculous. You cannot hold us responsible for the vindictive actions of a former employee." "Mr. Wheeler," Eleanor said coldly, "the board is holding you responsible for misrepresenting the nature and stability of client relationships during the acquisition process and for implementation decisions that have cost this company hundreds of millions of dollars. Your personal attacks on Miss Andrews only reinforce concerns about your judgment." As the meeting concluded, I felt no triumph, only a sense that justice had finally begun to be served. The damage to both companies was substantial and would take months, if not years, to repair, but accountability had finally been established. In the elevator descending from the boardroom, my attorney turned to me. That went about as well as could be expected. Their legal position is weak, given the documented assurances you received. I nodded, processing the events of the day. It was never about revenge, you know. It was about consequences for deliberate choices. As we exited the building, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The chapter was not fully closed, but a reckoning had begun. The next phase would be about rebuilding not just for me personally, but for the clients and team members who had been caught in the crossfire of corporate callousness. 6 months later, I sat in my corner office at Apogee Systems, reviewing quarterly performance reports with a sense of satisfaction. The view of the city skyline reminded me daily of how much had changed since that fateful morning when I was escorted from Innovate Tech's offices. My new role as Senior Vice President of Enterprise Solutions had exceeded even my own expectations. I had assembled a team of 28 professionals, including many former Innovate Tech colleagues who had chosen to follow me. Jessica now led our marketing department with increased resources and autonomy. Marcus had built a sales team that had already exceeded their annual targets with 2 months remaining in the fiscal year. Rachel managed our largest accounts, implementing the client success methodologies we had refined together over years. The crown jewel of our success was the GlobalX relationship, which had expanded beyond the original contract scope. Barbara Johnson had become not just a client, but a mentor, regularly inviting me to speak at industry forums about building authentic business relationships. We built something special here because we started with trust, I told my team during our morning meeting. Not just promising results, but actually delivering on those promises consistently. After the team dispersed, I opened my laptop to catch up on industry news. An article immediately caught my eye. NextGen announces restructuring. Thomas Wheeler departs as CEO. The investigation into the acquisition debacle had concluded with definitive findings. Thomas had deliberately misrepresented the nature of client relationships during due diligence, specifically concealing the extent to which major accounts depended on individual relationships rather than institutional processes. Richard Harrington had participated by developing termination plans for key personnel before the acquisition closed, while publicly touting the talent retention aspects of the deal. The consequences had been severe. Thomas had been forced to resign and forfeit significant portions of his acquisition, proceeds under the fraud provisions of the agreement. Richard had also departed along with several executives who had participated in the deception. NextGen's stock had partially recovered, but the company's reputation had suffered lasting damage. Innovate Tech, once a rising star in the industry, was now simply a troubled division of NextGen, its distinctive culture and innovation edge diminished. Several former colleagues who had remained reported a transformed environment focused on cost-cutting rather than client success. My phone buzzed with a text from David Chen, now my peer in Apogee's executive team. Have you seen the news about Thomas? Karma works in mysterious ways. I smiled, but felt no malicious pleasure in Thomas's downfall. The experience had taught me that true success is not about winning at others' expense, but about creating sustainable value through authentic relationships and ethical leadership. That evening, I met Jessica, Marcus, and Rachel for our monthly dinner, a tradition we had maintained through all the changes. I never imagined we would all end up working together again, Jessica said, raising her glass, especially not under better conditions than before. To unexpected second chances, Marcus added. Rachel, always the most reflective of the group, said, I learned more from those few months of chaos than from years of stability. Mainly that how people handle pressure reveals their true character. I nodded in agreement. The hardest lesson for me was learning that loyalty in business is rarely reciprocated by institutions, only by individuals. For years, I believed my dedication to the company would be recognized and rewarded. I confused the company with the people running it. What would you do differently if you could go back? Jessica asked. I considered the question carefully. I would have built stronger boundaries between my personal identity and professional role. I gave that company everything, including relationships and health. When it was taken away, I temporarily lost my sense of self. But you found it again, Marcus observed, more authentic than before. That is the paradox, I agreed. Sometimes we need to lose what we thought was important to discover what truly matters. The healing process had been gradual but transformative. Initially, the humiliation and betrayal had consumed my thoughts. Over time, with support from friends and family, I had neglected during my Innovate Tech years. I rebuilt my confidence and rediscovered parts of myself that had been suppressed by constant work demands. Ironically, being fired had forced me to reconnect with my core values and authentic leadership style. At Apogee, I instituted policies I had always wanted at Innovate Tech: reasonable working hours, transparent communication, and genuine work-life balance. Our retention rates were exceptional, and our client satisfaction scores set industry benchmarks. The most important relationships in my life had been strengthened rather than sacrificed on the altar of corporate success. I had reconnected with family members, rebuilt friendships, and even begun dating again after years of putting romance on hold for work commitments. The best revenge is not just success, Rachel mused, but being successful while remaining true to yourself. It was never about revenge, I corrected gently. It was about consequences and accountability. The fact that we built something better afterward is not revenge, it is growth. As our dinner concluded, I reflected on the journey from devastation to renewal. The experience had taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, integrity, and the true nature of professional relationships. I had learned to value myself beyond my job title and to build a career aligned with my authentic values. Most importantly, I had discovered that even the most painful betrayals can become catalysts for positive transformation if we choose to learn and grow from them rather than being defined by bitterness. The following week, I received an unexpected email from Eleanor Blackwell, the Next Gen board chair who had presided over the investigation. "Marianne," she wrote, "I wanted to reach out personally as we close this difficult chapter. The board has completed its investigation and the findings confirmed your account of events. While this does not undo the harm caused, I hope it provides some vindication. Your composure and professionalism throughout this situation impressed me greatly. If our paths cross in the future, I would welcome the opportunity to discuss how companies can better align leadership incentives with ethical business practices." Her acknowledgement was meaningful, not because I needed external validation, but because it represented a potential ripple effect of positive change beyond my immediate circumstances. Perhaps other leaders would learn from Thomas's mistakes and recognize that sustainable success comes from integrity, not manipulation. As I closed my laptop that evening, I felt a sense of completion. The story that had begun with betrayal had transformed into one of empowerment, growth, and renewed purpose. The journey had been painful, but ultimately affirming of my core belief that authentic relationships, ethical leadership, and personal integrity are not just morally right, but practically advantageous in business and in life. Have you ever experienced a professional betrayal that eventually led to positive changes in your life? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of overcoming workplace betrayal resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories of resilience and transformation. And if you know someone who might be struggling after being blindsided in their career, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing we are not alone in our experiences is the first step toward healing. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, your worth is never defined by a title or a company's decisions about your future.